What is up, Corner Nation? I know you guys have been waiting a long time. You guys have been demanding that Neil and I analyze Sleeping Beauty. It's been just like everybody's been screaming at me. I've been getting phone calls from Chad, from Luke Thompson. I mean, just like everybody's been asking for this. So, fine. Finally, if you want me so badly to analyze Sleeping Beauty, fine, I'll do it. Okay. But only because you guys want me to. So I'm here with Steel Neil, Daedalus.
In the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger in the original Total Recall, give the people air. That's the original. That's before most times of people in the corner. But
I don't think anyone saw the second the remake of Total Recall.
I would totally, although it's super inappropriate, but I would totally do Total Recall with you, the original, for an analysis.
And just watch it live. Just pirate it, just have a live stream of it going on and pirate it. Just something illegal. Yes, we should do that. Yeah. We should do something illegal.
That's Arnold Schwarzenegger is like the 6'6" android lady, where he's like, get ready for a surprise.
It's not a tumor. It's no. Yeah. Dang. That is so funny that those movies just were so ubiquitous that I don't even think I ever sat down to watch it, but just through like TV movies, had always seen it. I'd seen it since like a very young age. But yeah, I think Neil and I both enjoy movies, or at least Neil mentioned that he would definitely do a movie analysis. And I think this is a classic go. I think you've seen the Jordan Peterson analysis, right?
Oh yeah. And also the Meaning Wave Sleeping Beauty song by
Akira the Don.
Akira the Don, that's it.
Akira the Don. That's so funny that I remember when I was like first getting into the corner and everything, and just I was first getting into the corner and just thinking how insane people would think I am, thinking like I'm watching like 4 hours of YouTube a day or whatever while I'm working, and then on top of that watching, like listening at the gym, the Meaning Wave like music of Jordan Peterson's voice being like, you gotta slay the dragon, but it's over like an EDM beat, so it's like you gotta slay the dragon, you know. And I was like, this is called being enlightened, folks. This is what it takes to be a master meaning crafter, is, you know.
Yeah. I got a whole playlist, so people can hit me up after school if they want my official Daedalus Meaning Wave playlist. It won't fly you too close to the sun.
If you got a link to it, I'll put it in the show notes.
Cool.
But we do, I mean, the presentation, it probably took me like, I would say 30 hours to put together this PowerPoint. Neil can vouch because he was here the entire 30 hours cheering me on. Doing
Stoicism has its purposes.
But we have some some slides. Yeah, so Sleeping Beauty, and I think my analysis is that actually she was very beautiful and she was sleeping. And that's what I realized when I finished the movie. I was like, oh, that character that was sleeping and beautiful, she was Sleeping Beauty the whole time. You know, it's very much a Usual Suspects type ending, you know, with Kevin Spacey sort of, you know, I'm like, oh, that was Sleeping Beauty the whole time.
Game, set, match.
You know, that is something that totally, I guess you only remember the parts that like sort of stick with you mimetically, but she wasn't actually sleeping for the majority of the movie. Like she was awake for a lot. Like I thought she would be like right at the beginning, she'd prick her finger as a kid and fall asleep and then be asleep until she was 16 and then be awoken. But she doesn't.
Was she metaphorically speaking sleeping the majority of the movie?
Wow. That is. But yeah.
So one thing you have to take into consideration with this, Alan, that as we do this, we are going head to head with the inevitable analysis of Peterson Academy.
Oh.
Okay. However, we have the luxury of 7 years of percolating on the ideas of JBP while he's stuck in 2017 with his Peterson Academy ideas. So we could take the 2017 analysis and we can grow it in 7 years of corner speak and, you know, absolutely dominate with facts and logic the Sleeping Beauty analysis.
Yeah, I think that is the sort of, you know, feel that I want to add. I want this to be a Daily Wire Ben Shapiro-esque. Like only one of us can win at the analysis game. Actually, Neil, that is wrong. She wasn't actually asleep. She was in a coma, which are different things, Neil, if you would know, because my wife is a doctor. So yeah, I think well, to just jump right in at the point you're talking about. Yeah, she's sort of raised very sheltered, because so she um just give you like a recap of parts of it. She's cursed that before she turns 16, that she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. Although one of the good fairies, out of the 3 fairies that people know, one of the good fairies, prevents enough of the curse, gets some of the curse juices off of her in time, such that she's able to prevent her from from dying when she pricks her finger and only falling asleep. But she's raised by the fairies until she's 16 in this little cottage out in the middle of nowhere. So she really doesn't have any sort of experience with the world,
or
right.
men for that matter.
Well, yeah,
she doesn't even get to see from birth. She doesn't get to see her father.
Yeah, that's very true. It's funny at the end when they do see each other, when the king and the queen see her for the first time, I kind of laughed that they just were like hugging her and like, yo, our daughter, but like they haven't seen her ever. They wouldn't really know. There's no like, you are our daughter, right? Okay, good. So there's not even a double check. Like they just happen to know. But
didn't they run the 14th century DNA test?
Yeah. I guess they have, true king vision, and they can know who everyone is based on, the true king.
My lord, my lady, we have rounded up all the babies born in the kingdom and have chosen you the most beautiful one. She will be your daughter.
That would be the ultimate reshuffle of just like, oh no, she's just like, you just like, oh, okay.
Jerry Springer show.
Yeah. Well, you can't be our daughter because, this one's way smarter and way more interesting to talk to. So she's our real daughter. But yeah, so I think definitely one of the first points of analysis is the fact that she's raised so out of contact with anybody. As when she meets Prince Charming, it's like a total heart attack moment. She's like, she has a like she ends up just running away from him, and yet at the same time, I think that sound from the movie, When Will I See You Again? Oh,
never.
Maybe
tomorrow.
Never. Yeah. Tomorrow. Oh no. And that's sort of used as this like, when you're sort of trying to get away from somebody, like a little meme joke. But in this movie, it's much more used as like she's falling in love with him. That she's actually, this is actually how people like, she's shocked by the experience, let's say, and yet that it's not really she's shocked by the experience, and yet it's like a good thing. She actually does fall in love with the prince, but I think that comes from her lack of experience, the fact that she is raised so sheltered, and I think that does lean into her her part of the curse. I think that she's to go to the Petersonian analysis, like her encounter with the world for the first time is so shocking that that's part of why she's able to, the part of why she ends up falling asleep. It's almost like the Buddha story of the Buddha's been protected from the real world. He's like a Hindu prince, and he's been protected from the world. And then the first time he actually encounters the sickness and death in the world, he's shocked by it.
So he actually goes, I don't know the full story there, but I think he goes to sleep, metaphorically speaking, for some period of time, because he goes and sits under the Bodhi tree
Yeah.
right? And
Mm.
that's the equivalent of, so something I want to talk about at some point in this conversation, but doesn't have to be right now, is like the Matthew Pajot holding pattern. Did you get to see the Matthew Pajot not podcast, I guess, conversation that dropped maybe 2 weeks ago?
I think I've seen like an hour and a half of it, which is like still less than half. But
Yeah.
why? What idea did you want to talk about from it?
I'm kind of skipping all over my notes here. I'm going to the end, but sometimes the first is last and the last is first. But so the sleep is in effect a holding pattern. I think those two things are very similar in that there's a lot of parts here. But yeah, you were talking to me before we got started just about the sleep motifs that are all over the movie. And part of it is the sleep to kind of avoid the trauma of whatever experience has occurred. But part of it also is that it's kind of, the world is waiting for something else to happen in some way, shape, or form. So the kingdom is, so all the way in the beginning, the kingdom is waiting for the birth of the child. And I wrote down many years they had longed for a child. So it's the equivalent of like the kingdom has been waiting and waiting. And basically the culture, for all intents and purposes, is stultified because they have no next generation. They're kind of stuck in whatever the current generation, the current paradigm is. So the whole culture is waiting. And then finally we have the good news of a child. And then, but once again, there's like this 16-year kind of waiting period. So it's, and then even after the 16-year waiting period, then she pricks her finger. We could talk about that, but then there's sleep again. There's another waiting period. And that waiting period is like the prince, like the 16 years of her is like, is mirrored almost by that short time period for the whole world waits in holding pattern for the prince to actually become worthy, you could say. That was something I was thinking of. It's like, what makes the prince actually like worthy to be married? And there's really nothing that makes him worthy until he has to, prove himself in some way, shape, or form. So it's like a movie of holding patterns. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I can see that of it's funny at the beginning when the prince first sees his betrothed, he must be like 4 or 5 years old. She's in a cradle on the right of the screen, or on the center right next to, or next to the king and queen. And the first time the prince sees Sleeping Beauty, she's an infant. She's like just recently born, and he sort of like makes a face at her because he's like, he's a 4 or 5 year old boy. He wants nothing to do with an infant. He has no ability to interact with it. And so he's not really, like you're saying, worthy to. Neither one of them are at the point in which they can come together and be a king and a queen. And this is them falling asleep, but specifically with the two kings who are older, and they're both sort of shown as like a little older, past middle age. But they talk about how the princess Sleeping Beauty and Prince Eric they've wanted to unite the kingdoms, that they're actually friends, and that they haven't been able to unite their kingdoms because of they don't have heirs to give to one another, to come together and unite the kingdom, which is very much
the people heirs.
Yeah. And so the holding pattern of waiting for them to come together, and even this is the wedding day when she turns 16, and this is supposed to be even when they fall asleep. The good witches, the good fairies, actually put them all to sleep, and the whole city. And it's actually, I think, another holding pattern of right as you're about to unite the kingdoms, right as you're supposed to get to the next phase, the kingdom's locked into its current paradigm of the current king and the two current kings. And as you can see here, they're a little older. He's got, the white beard, and he's got the goatee beard thing going on. Right as they are about to change that and hand over the reins to the next generation, Sleeping Beauty falls asleep, and so the fairies put the whole kingdom under a spell of sleep. So the whole kingdom sort of like, okay, we're paused. We're in this pause phase, because we can't go to the next place yet, because we don't have a king, we don't have a prince and a princess to come together to go to the next phase.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck by the whole thing in terms of not just the Christian symbolism, but I'll even say Catholic symbolism, and I'll probably get to this in a little bit. But like the parable of keep your lamps lit, like the parable of the maidens that bring enough oil, let's say, for maybe we could even pull that up, but basically there are some maidens that bring extra oil and some that do not. And I think this is kind of a direct, and I didn't even write this down, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's directly associated with that parable. And you could think of the extra oil as like the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And you could think of the gifts as a Holy Spirit in relation to those three fairies, the Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather.
Yeah.
And the extra oil would be something like, in here, it would be something like, okay, we can't stop the curse, but we can give you just enough to keep you alive. And the same thing with the prince. Like, he gets captured by Maleficent and her forces. It's like, okay, we can't stop you from getting captured, but we can give you just enough to escape the chains and get off on your journey. And so like the three fairies are there like just enough that they have, and like he has enough oil basically to keep his lamp lit, so to speak. And the reason that I'm thinking that's tied with this is because of the sleep motif. And there's in biblical speak, there's always that association with sleep and death, like always. Like and I mentioned this to you before we started, but even in the like the official readings for the Catholic Church, and I think Lutherans, they also follow this, but like the readings this upcoming Sunday are about the basically men and women. And so the Old Testament reading is Genesis, when God puts Adam into a deep sleep, because he says it's not good for a man to be alone, and then takes out a rib. And I was thinking about like, why is it a deep sleep? And maybe it's something like sleep is actually when we're changed and transformed. We think we're changed and transformed during the day, but it's actually the sleep that kind of processes the things of the day. And so it's almost like every night we have that holding pattern where we're processing the things that are changing as a result of the day. And it's almost like yeah, I mean, we could go down sort of a Jungian analysis, which I think is right, but also I don't think it's just Jungian. So the Jungian analysis of this would be like every character in the movie is Aurora, or like every character is the one person. Like, so if you're a writer, for instance, and you're writing a novel, like every single character in that novel is you. It has to be, because all of it comes out of you. So in effect, like in any good story, you're sort of like disassociating the personalities that already live inside of you, and you're kind of playing with those. So like Maleficent is kind of the evil side of Aurora, and the prince is like the consciousness of Aurora trying to, well, that's the Peterson analysis in a nutshell. But did you know, I'm kind of all over the place here, so I apologize, but like, did you know that Philip means friend of horses? And the horse, well, the horse is like, if you think of like the Patronus, like Expecto Patronum, is it a horse, or is it something else? No, it's the deer for Harry Potter. But like
they each have their own Patronus, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for Harry himself. But I was thinking about flora and fauna and the animal symbolism and the idea of how do I say this? Like I'm trying to associate sort of the active aspect of Aurora's psychology, which are represented by the characters and the animals, and then there's also the kind of passive aspect, which is the flora,
Mm.
and you got the flora and fauna, and then I'm trying to associate too many things here, and Philip is in effect like one of the animals, like he represents the same thing as um like all these different critters and creatures that are working, like the critters and creatures that are there with Aurora, but also the fairies, and they're all
Mm.
representative of these active parts that are trying to help her and save her at various points in the story.
Yeah. 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 And yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing with Sleeping Beauty is there's not a lot of her doing a lot. You know, it's a lot of her being affected by the people around her for good or bad.
Mhm.
Maleficent sort of mind controls her into going up to the tower and pricking her finger. The fairies, they make the dress for her. Prince Eric comes and shows up to her cottage. And all the different forces that are sort of acting upon her and the different ways in which they like change her life. Obviously, from the perspective of Maleficent, it's for the bad. But I think that does make sense that she all these different forces are there affecting the individual. They're all the different parts of our mind that we categorize to help the individual, and the transformation that we go through during stress. And I think that like even Maleficent and like her being evil is in a lot of ways good for the characters. I think that it helps the fairies and Prince Philip. I think I referred to him as Prince Eric, which is the Little Mermaid earlier, but Prince Philip. I think it helps them orient towards her, or like it helps them like even the fairies. If you look at the fairies, they are sort of like sickly sweet in the beginning and sort of not really
Useful.
effectual. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
They,
if you look at
they
like,
don't really become useful until the threat is upon them, so to speak.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they transform themselves. I mean, ironically, she's 16 in this, and they've been raising her for 16 years, and they try and bake a cake or clean the house or make a dress, and they're like hopeless, and they literally can't do it. So I'm like, how did they survive for 16 years? It's like, oh, rocks for dinner again, Princess
Go out and
Aurora.
pick berries.
Yeah,
again.
I hope you enjoy uncooked berries again for dinner for the for the 400th week in a row. Yummy, yummy. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you said a few things I want to pick up on. So one thing I noticed that you said, so just going back to Maleficent, when ultimately Maleficent is actually a force for the good of both Prince Philip, not Eric, Philip, and Aurora.
Mm.
Ultimately, she is, but so I think I was brought to Matthew Pajot in this too, because he talks about kind of the two forms of adversary, or kind of benevolent adversary or adversary that's truly against, and Maleficent would be kind of the one that's truly against in this case. But And then you have the three fairies that are kind of her adversaries in that. So she gets to the point where her heart's broken. I mean, it's broken just meeting because they say you can't fall in love with this random dude. You got to go and marry the prince, and her heart is broken and shattered. And
Mhm.
that's when at her most vulnerable, it's only at her most vulnerable that Maleficent is able to kind of seduce her, and that's when Maleficent takes her. Um, but so there's suddenly a switch where the three fairies become her adversary as well in that, because
Mhm.
she does, I mean, she goes along with them, but obviously she's not happy to do their bidding. But what do you think about this idea of like just the necessity of having an adversary to bring about the final change, or the telos of what she needs to move to? And the same with Eric for that matter. Sorry, Philip.
Mhm. Mhm. I shouldn't have introduced. That's the advertise. I'm your adversary, and I'm trying to introduce wrong names. Um, yeah,
Benevolently.
yeah. I mean, it goes back to like at the same time the idea of like hating the opposing basketball team. It's like, yeah, they're your enemy. I mean, they're your opposition in one sense, but if you make them your total enemy, then you wouldn't be able to play basketball with them. If you try and destroy the other team, literally destroy them, then they wouldn't exist and you wouldn't have a basketball game because you need that. Um, so, I mean, uh, setting up the thing that you find meaningful such that it takes into account the forces that are opposed to you and how you can tackle those. Um, I think that's definitely how you have to look at the world. Um, like if your map of how to act doesn't have sort of the dragons that are going to meet you out there on the map, then you're going to run out into them without any understanding. But once you map them enough and you expect them, they almost become like that opposing basketball team. It's like you have an opposing, you don't you the opposing basketball team doesn't just jump at you, spontaneously. I mean, you have an expectation of where you're going to see that opposition and when you're going to see it. And if you have a good enough map, it's not just that you plan like this is the time of the game, but it's, oh, me and my wife are having a kid and like this is causing stress on the marriage, or this job is a new job and that's stressing me out. But if you have a good roadmap, you'd be like, oh, well, I knew that this new job would be stressful because I knew that I would be meeting lots of new people and having lots of new experiences. So it's actually okay that these things are in front of me, and actually handling them is going to make me into a stronger person because I will now become the person who knows how to handle that type of dragon in the future.
Yeah, building his capability. And you'll notice that each thing that he has to face, um, it kind of scales up in its magnitude. So what happens is everything that he faces, the fairies help him less and less with each stage, and also the magnitude of the risk or the threat goes up at each stage. So the first one, the fairies do all the work, which is they break him out of
Yeah,
the and
the
then
shackles.
he's shackled, and then he's running, and then there's like these rocks that are about to crush him, and the fairies
Mm,
turn them into bubbles, and he's fine. And
mm.
then like there's another thing where he has to jump over this like chasm, but he actually makes the jump. I think they help him
They
with
give like a
something.
little rainbow. They just
No,
trace the
they do it.
outline
No,
of the
no.
jump.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they do a rainbow, but he has to actually ride through it. So he's
yeah,
actually active at that point.
yeah.
Then with the brambles that come up, he's the one hacking through the brambles. So
Yeah.
he's doing most of the work, but he gets stuck and the fairies unhook him. And
Mm,
then finally you get to like the boss fight. And then with the boss fight, he's doing the whole thing. Like
yeah.
so like every step he's sort of building his competence and confidence in being able to, let's say, confront the dragon, because he probably wouldn't be ready all the way at the beginning. Now that's a holding pattern that's like really abbreviated and squashed, but that is a holding
Mm,
pattern of like there's all these movies where you have like the tutelage of the old mentor tuteling the young guy, and it takes like years for the young guy to get like The Mask of Zorro, which is not even a great movie, but it's like Anthony Hopkins, Anthony Tompkins, Anthony Hopkins tuteling Antonio Banderas, and until Antonio Banderas can like be a badass. And anyway, but it's that holding pattern of like getting ready for whatever is coming up next.
And then at the end, Merryweather is actually held back from fighting directly with the dragon that Maleficent has turned herself into. Of like, she's about to go at the dragon, but she's held back by the other fairies. And I mean, I think at that point, that really grabbed me of like, ultimately the prince is the one who can fight the dragon. Like the fairies can help the Prince Philip, but the fairies can't directly go against Maleficent. So it's like the fairies grow the prince, and then the prince becomes the thing that can conquer the dragon. But the dragon, Maleficent, is more powerful than the fairies.
I wouldn't say more powerful. I would say more of that. She's more overt in that. So you get the, I don't know. I get that maybe I'm just projecting too much Christianity into this, but like you get the sense that Maleficent is just her own power. Like she's the source of evil. Well, she does say all the powers of hell at one point. But you get the sense that the fairies, they're much more sort of conduits of whatever good that they have, and that they themselves are not all that strong. But you get the sense that the arena itself is sort of helping the fairies. So it's almost like God as arena is being projected into the spirit of the fairies, which is then,
The one thing that I wanted to bring up as well about the gifts of the fairies is it reminded me of Isaac. Reminded me of Esau and Jacob, and how that Esau was supposed to receive the boon, but then Jacob stole it. But the idea of the fairies, and I don't know if I have a good analysis of this, but the fairies, one gives, Flora gives the beauty, Fauna gives the singing, and then Merryweather still hasn't given her gift. And that's before, and then Maleficent gives the curse, and that's where Merryweather actually has the ability to step in and reduce the curse so that it doesn't kill Sleeping Beauty, but that it simply puts her to sleep. But what was interesting is I was like, that's a very interesting idea that for whatever reason, the fairies only can give one gift. You know, it's like, oh, good thing Merryweather didn't give her like one shot, one kill away already. You know, just like her one use, you know, whatever. So there was like this special magic that that was left over after Maleficent did her thing that could protect her. So I just thought that was interesting in the light of like Jacob and Esau, of like the idea of there being one boon to give the child.
And what's so interesting to me about that is, so in effect, what she does is she turns death, which is permanent, into a death and resurrection, which is sleep. It's like, oh, death, where is your sting? So now the sleep becomes this process of transformation into something better versus a death which is actually completely dead, you could say. So it's and in fact, like that judo move, I guess it's a judo move, to channel my inner Clint D. Because Maleficent herself says, indeed, she will grow in grace and beauty. It's almost like Maleficent wants her to be optimistic, happy, wonderful, all to just tear her down. it hit her all the harder.
Mm,
And so there's nothing that evil enjoys more than knowing it's going to turn, let's say, everything good to ash, like Age of Decay. Everything good is just going to come crumbling down in the end. So enjoy your goodness because I'm going to have the last laugh, sort of thing.
yeah.
And then the making it sleep is like it is a resurrection motif, totally.
Mm,
And it's almost like the harrowing of hell for the prince. He's basically going into hell for that short period of time, kicking evil's buttocks.
mhm.
Yeah. And what is that? It's sort of like the idea of harrowing of hell in Catholic theology is to bring the souls that genuinely want to join Christ out of hell into the light, into
Mm,
paradise. And it's like everyone who's asleep who's waiting for the new kingdom and the new rebirth is waiting for that. Yeah, waiting for that harrowing to be led out of the darkness, out of sleep.
yeah. Um,
Sorry,
mm.
I dropped the Catholic bomb on the Protestant, but
No, I definitely think there's a because the curse that Maleficent, or the not exactly a curse, but the punishment that, or the affliction that Maleficent wants to put on Prince Philip is that he would be too old to be the king anymore. That she would
yeah,
eventually let him out, but he'd be old and gray, and then he couldn't actually. Um,
yep,
and so it's interesting that, like, so that's one idea, is like the death of decay, and sort of the time is going to pass so that he will just be old and can't do anything. But that is also contraposed um toward the idea of the whole kingdom being asleep, and the
mhm,
fact that sort of this whole fight to prevent that, to save the prince and the princess, is actually done while everyone's sleeping. That
mhm,
the resurrection of, like, so we start with um, the everyone coming together, excited about the new baby. They're going to betroth that baby um, to Prince Philip, and then it turns out that she falls asleep, and so the fairies put everybody to sleep. But then, while everyone is asleep, that's when Prince Philip is able to fight the dragon and wake everybody up, and then be betrothed to the princess.
okay. Christ is born. It's Christmas. Everybody celebrates. Everybody cheers. Everybody's waiting for 16 years now. That's not the case in Christ's case, but everybody's waiting for 16 years to
Yeah.
Christ to usher in the new kingdom. And then
Well,
on the day where he rides into Jerusalem, that he's ready to celebrate his new kingdom. Well, actually, it's not the day, it's the week. But then he's
mm,
killed. But really, it's not death. But then what happens in uh, man, I'm turning this into Catholic evangelization. I apologize. I wasn't even
no, no,
intending
no.
to do this, but like so the only day of the year that as Catholics we don't take the Eucharist or can't take the Eucharist is the day between it's the Friday between
It's Good
Good
Friday.
yeah, good exactly. Good Friday. Or no, we do take Good Friday. Sorry, it's Saturday. It's the Saturday. I always get that mixed up because Christ dies on Good Friday and he resurrects on Easter. And so there's that one day where it's like it basically he's hidden, like he's hidden, he's asleep, and it's not like he's not there, but like everything,
He's in the tomb. Yeah.
yeah, everything in the church we actually cover up everything, like
Yeah.
we cover up all the statues and all that. And it is this like waiting period where we're like asleep, for the lack of a better word. Um, and
Mm,
yeah, I didn't even, to be honest, I wasn't even thinking about that as I was watching this. It's just as we're discussing, it's really
yeah.
hitting me.
The um yeah, yeah, and but I will like to add to that, and sort of the birth of Christ and his early life. I just reminded me of the wedding at Cana, and so I pulled up the verse. Uh On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And we know at that point that Jesus turns the water to wine and performs one of his early miracles. But the reason I bring that up is prior to that, Jesus is sort of growing in knowledge, that, and then it's like that's Sleeping Beauty from 0 to 16. It's like Jesus is even saying, like, once I get involved, once I do the miracles, like, it's only gonna this is gonna happen. You saying this is starting the clock to me being crucified.
Yes.
It's like, you just hit the clock. And his mother's like, well, you're the Christ. Like, it's been revealed to me by the angel of the Lord. So, like, let's get this party started. And Christ is like, just so you know, like, you can't get to the resurrection without going through the crucifixion. There's a reason why everything's going to be covered up in the church. There's a reason why everyone's going to have to fall asleep, because I'm going to fall asleep.
Well, not only that, the prophecy of I think it's Simeon in the temple, that where they take Jesus to be blessed and circumcised. I think he's like 8 years old, or not 8 years, 8 days or something like that. And Simeon gives Mary a prophecy and says, this child is for the rise and fall of many in Israel, and a sword will pierce through your heart also, so that the thoughts out of many hearts shall be revealed. So it's like she actually knows what she's starting. She doesn't know the entirety of it, but she knows enough that she's kicking off a clock, so to speak.
Yeah. And so I think that this is a really good point about sort of from 0 to 16, she's sort of protected. But then on the 16th birthday, and this goes to no, I didn't want that one. The reason that the crow is able to spot where she is because the fairies use magic to do the chores of the cake.
And that's the wedding at Cana. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, is basically once the miracles start happening, once the party gets started, like, of course, like, it's going to call evil into the world. It's like going to,
there's with any new good thing, there's always a counteracting force that says, like, what are you doing? What's going on? There's always the, I see what you're saying.
And that is the that's the opposition that's good that we were talking about earlier, of like, it doesn't make sense to feed the homeless if there wasn't hunger. Like, oh, I'm going to feed all the homeless. Well, you will have to face the hunger and the fact that people have this problem. So if you introduce good, you're of course going to immediately encounter the monster. And that's a little, like, hard to express, but like, to make it more clear, it's like, if you have a parent in a household who's like abusive, if verbally abusive, you might learn a way to avoid that encounter. You might learn to, like, avoid that parent. But if someone said, like, hey, I'm going to actually solve this problem for you, you better believe that you're going to have to encounter that monster. You're going to have to, you're going to live outside of fear. You have to, and the monster eventually will encounter you. So once you say, like, I'm not going to live in fear anymore, I'm going to act the way I want, that parent who's mistreating you is going to say, like, well, why are you being so noisy? Don't don't you realize on Saturday mornings everyone needs to be quiet because I'm hungover? And it's like, well, I'm not gonna like, be locked in my room all day. Like I'm gonna start, that monster is gonna come out. So if you start using the magic, once you say I'm going to make the beautiful thing, of course the monsters are gonna come out. And
Yeah.
that's the like the wedding at Cana of like, once I show that I'm capable of the miraculous, like that's going to draw Herod and Pilate and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They're going to come out, like then they're going to come to me, like there's a reason why they hunt down Jesus.
So, and this is, I think, in a conversion experience, this is the experience of hitting rock bottom. This is the experience of beginning to orient your life around any telos. Is that the moment you pick a telos, like, okay, I'm going to orient myself around this, then there's two categories. The moment you do that, because there's everything that feeds into that telos, and then there's everything else. And the
Yeah.
everything else, inevitably, even if it's neutral, is not feeding into that purpose, that ultimate highest good that you're
Yeah.
aiming for.
And then when you encounter that, you need to come to some sort of understanding with that object outside of the telos. Is whatever it's like, I'm going to become a great artist, is if you spend all your time doing art, well, people are going to be like, well, what happened? Like, we used to be friends, or you used to do this, or this used to be true, and now it's no longer true, and you're a bad friend because you don't hang out with us anymore, or like you must be this, that, or the third,
You
or
changed, man.
yeah, you've changed, bro. And so that once you have the telos, like it's going to start to orient. Whereas you might have thought like, well, these are my friends. This is just the situation now is good and there are no dragons on the map. But then you put a new map and you say, well, I want to orient going this way. Suddenly dragons are going to pop out because you've oriented towards one way. So anything that's opposed to that is going to look like a dragon. Anything trying to push you away from your telos is going to be a dragon, is going to be a blocker, or whatever you want to call it. And you're going to have to learn to be to fight that. You're going to have to encounter, in the same way that once you try and celebrate Princess Aurora, once you say like, okay, we've put a veil over Princess Aurora, like Jesus had a veil, like, he had sort of this veil over him until he reached a certain age. Once you pull it off, everyone's going to respond to that. With Aurora, it's like the second, it's like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to make her a birthday cake. We're trying to make her a beautiful dress. And once we try to do that and celebrate her, that's when the forces of evil, like, okay, that's where the princess is. We couldn't find her when the kingdom was static. The king was still the king, and the other king was still the other king. Prince Philip's dad was still the king. Princess Aurora's dad was still the king of his kingdom. We couldn't come together. But once we've identified these are the people who are going to become the prince and the princess, then we have identified them. We've taken the veil off of them. We're celebrating her 16th birthday and her marriage to Princess Philip. That's when it goes from like everything's normal, everything's fine. There's everything's boring, nothing's happening. To sort of the kingdom's asleep, to now there's this whole like conflict where everyone's actually going to change, and that all these characters do change. Prince Philip has to step up and become a knight and sort of a warrior. The fairies have to face Maleficent. The two kings sort of go to sleep. The kingdom sort of like goes on pause. And that's when we unpause it, when everyone wakes up, you have the people who've gone through the tragedy or gone through the conflict, you could say. And then they're ready to push the kingdom forward. Now we don't have two kingdoms anymore. We have one kingdom, and that kingdom's been knit together. And it's funny, this format, like this style of story, I feel like could be about like the most mundane thing, or it could be like about like this whole kingdoms. This story could be about, people who want to learn, people, it could be the Karate Kid, or, have you seen Heavyweights? The
No,
movie.
no,
Oh,
haven't seen it.
okay. But yeah, it could be just about like Karate Kid and two dojos that are going at it, or it could be about two kingdoms that are going at it. But that format, that style, is the same pattern over time of once you reveal your intention, once Aurora said you pulled back the curtain on Princess Aurora and you say she's the princess, that's when the forces that are opposed to her being the princess come out of the woodwork and attack her. And that's when the prince has to step up and be the prince by pushing back against the those dragons, those blockers. And then by pushing through them, but that's the other thing that we were talking about earlier. The only way he could become the king is learning to push against the dragons. Is the only way that a king can be a king is knowing how to fight dragons.
Yeah. I mean, until he has to face, his true challenge, you could, so one idea I want to talk about, maybe this ties into it, is like, what is true love's kiss? Like, why this theme? And this is through like all the Disney movies, but this has to be beyond just Disney. Like, why?
Mm.
So why is it true love that we're looking? Why isn't it like true good instead of like true, or why isn't it like, I don't know, like why the phrase true love, and why is it a kiss? Like, why those two things? And it's something like, for example, could there be true love's kiss unless he had to fight through or for her? Like, unless he had to fight through all those things. Or is it a necessary path to get to true love's kiss? And then we could also talk about the act of like, so, okay. So one thing there's a general theme I want to talk about is, I keep going back to biblical stuff, like the guys. So I want to talk about the Garden of Eden a little bit, and the fall, the original fall, because I think it'll tie into like this true love's kiss. So why do Adam and Eve make clothes? So I think it's because they're vulnerable. I keep going back to that word vulnerability in other conversations, but the nakedness is really about vulnerability. And it's like feeling exposed, feeling that I could be harmed, that I could be hurt. And so they make clothes. And it's, I think the eating of the knowledge of good and evil, the eating of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, something about the mouth and intimacy. Like, the mouth is one of the most intimate parts there are. And the idea of like taking something inside of you, like you're taking something inside of you with, and so, okay. So Adam and Eve eat the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. They take that inside of them. As a result of that, they feel vulnerable, exposed. They need to make clothes. They need to hide from God.
Yeah.
The spinning wheel for her, and this is prior to the Industrial Revolution, the spinning wheel was the primary occupation of women prior to the Industrial Revolution. It's how women had to spend their time to make clothes. That was the spinning wheel. And it took a lot of time to take the fibers and to spin that into yarn or string. That took a tremendous amount of time. So the spinning wheel is both a feminine symbol of the need to make clothes for vulnerability, but it's also a symbol of the time, eternity, the turning of time, the age of decay, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's in, okay, I'm going full Peterson here. So in the encounter with the nature of what it means to be a grown woman, in the encounter with the nature of what it means to be a grown woman at 16, where she's losing her freedom, like she's giving up her independence, her complete freedom to go about the forest, and she has to forcibly be bound to her husband that she's never met. And that is encountering that is the prick of her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel, because the spinning wheel is like, you're going to toil to protect yourself from the world, make these clothes. You're going to that's going to be your life's work, in effect. And to bring this all the way back to true love's kiss, trying to connect a whole bunch of things here, and I'm not doing all that well. But so the reversal of the original sin of the Garden of Eden, the reversal of that original sin
Mm.
is to voluntarily expose yourself to the other. So the kiss is that voluntary, intimate connection between two people. It's, you know, you're basically taking like the source of germs of that person, it's just their mouth, and you're saying, okay, we're gonna join these two things. So like we're in
Mm.
this together, basically. That's what it is. We're in this
Yeah.
together. Um,
And the,
and so yeah, go ahead.
well, it's just that like love is the thing that binds things together,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of things that get bound together that then are ripped apart or aren't bound together in a healthy way. So the idea of like true love, the true, like the right prince and the right princess coming together and them both being committed to the roles that they have, him being like, I will encounter the dragon, I will be I will protect you, and I wield the sword and the shield, and her being like, I will take on the role of like femininity, like you talked about, with being like taking on like, okay, that means I have to, I'll have kids, and I'll probably be, I won't have the beauty that I once had, and I'm gonna be spinning thread, or doing the feminine role. But it's they're joined together correctly so that they both can step into those roles, because you can't have one without the other.
They,
You can't have the
they,
good husband without the good wife, and the good wife without the good husband.
they both have to pass through that, let's say, the valley of death, or
Mm.
they have to pass through the holding pattern that prepares them for what's on the other side
Yeah.
of that holding pattern.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And so I think that the fact that the fact that she's desperate, the fact that when she doesn't think she'll be able to be with Prince Philip, or the stranger, and she thinks she'll be with some prince she doesn't know, that's when it becomes like the tyrannical, we're going to force you to be married, and she doesn't want to engage, and she doesn't want this false union of, I'm going to be forced to be this bride that I don't want to be, to someone who I don't know. So there is it's sort of, I mean, I guess you could call it convenient, but both like that love, that both the passionate love and the duty of the prince is the right person, the prince needs to be with the princess, but also they like each other and they're good for each other. Those both come together and make it so that she's not despondent and easily led astray when she is married. Because right before she's married, that's when she's the most despondent, because she thinks she's going to be betrothed to some random dude. So when
And
she like,
the most vulnerable to Maleficent, when
yeah,
she
yeah,
feels like she's lost her chosen future.
yeah,
She's lost her individuality, for lack of a
yeah.
better. Yeah.
And you could call that the impure kiss, the non true love kiss, of like, well, I'm gonna marry this guy because my parents want me to, but I don't want to be. I'm not voluntarily growing into this role. I'm doing it because I have to.
Well, Maleficent offers her that way out, actually. So the way I thought of it was Cain and Abel a little bit, in that God says to Cain, "Hey, sin is crouched at your door, and it wants you. The sin wants you, but you have to master it." And it was always like
Mm.
Maleficent appears there. I was thinking to myself, and if anyone watching this has any ideas, I was like, why does Maleficent appear in a fireplace? I had trouble with. I don't have a good answer to that, but like she appears in a fire, like it's a dead fireplace. It's empty, and her spirit kind of appears there. And then uh what's her name, Aurora, like there's one point where Aurora kind of pulls her hand back before she touches the thing, like,
Mm.
but she, so you could tell that she has some agency still. It's not like a full curse where Maleficent has fully possessed Aurora. Like Aurora is somewhat choosing to participate in whatever Maleficent is guiding
Well,
her towards.
yeah. And also, why would you need her to do anything if you already had her fully under control prior to her pricking her finger? So
Yeah.
the curse isn't fully taken effect until the fingers pricked. So it's like more of Maleficent influencing Sleeping Beauty rather than fully being in control of Sleeping Beauty. And the idea of her being given this false identity, of being like, oh, we're just going to force you to marry someone that you don't want to be with. That's when she becomes susceptible, like you said earlier.
So a lot of stuff about vulnerability throughout this entire movie, which has been like my high horse. Like I've been pushing that word, like vulnerability. And I'm gonna keep doing it because I think it's a key. Like it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve in the garden. If you could pull up the one image that I sent you that was really obscure, but this is related to the vulnerability too, is like the so the whole first part of the movie is basically the Holy Spirit or the Trinity, the three angels, whatever you want to call them. The whole first part is them like trying to be less vulnerable, basically, like hiding, like basically the whole first 2/3 is like them trying to reduce the risk. So so this scene right here, what this is they're worried about being overheard and they're trying to figure out a plan to protect Aurora, like near the beginning of the movie. So they shrink themselves down to very small and they go inside this is called a tabernacle, the thing on the right, which is in Catholicism, like the tabernacle is what holds hosts. So it are blessed, already sanctified. I forget the word, but it holds Jesus basically. Like so the most precious thing is held in that tabernacle. So there's this whole theme of like, we're going to protect the thing. We're going to keep it sacred. And then the flip that happens once everybody goes to sleep is like, now they're on the attack. Now they're like, we got nothing left to lose. Free the prince, attack. And so it's basically like this withdrawal until the time is right for the prince to do his thing. You could call it the masculine spirit of the kingdom to do its thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that you do there's a great line from The Wire of like, you come at the king, you best not miss. Of if you have a dragon, if you're going to encounter it, you better be ready to fully fight it, because the the dragon's not going to hold back. Like the dragon is ready to fight. And I think that's one thing that even in physical fighting that shocks people is like, well, there's not really a like kid real fighting. Like immediately the other person has to want to fight as hard as they can, and you have to fight as hard as you can, because it's not safe to encounter one another in any other way in a fight. Because it's not like, okay, I'm going to go 50% and you go 50% and then you use your real strength and then I use my real strength. Because if you're the last one to use your real strength, like you could have already lost the fight. And so I just bring that up to say, like, I think that they aren't ready to fight Maleficent. And they even say that this screen grab, which seems random, is Merryweather, the blue one, saying like she wants to turn her into a toad or something. And I think the green one saying, I guess she's Fauna, or Flora, a green one saying like, oh, we only use our magic for good. But later they use their magic to help defeat Maleficent. So I think they aren't really ready to encounter.
Yeah, it's only through an agent, so they can't actually fight against her. Actually, she does turn the crow into, so maybe the movie messes that up because Merryweather does turn the crow into stone at one point, but that's not Maleficent directly.
Yeah, I think that might
for the most part.
It's sort of a spirit of Maleficent. It's like one of the agents of Maleficent and not Maleficent directly, because they do hold Merryweather back from encountering the dragon directly and only through Prince Philip.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And but yeah, so I mean, I think that's like,
should we call it a wrap? Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
think we did a pretty good job.
That, you know, we got some insights, some little like dollops of insight here and there.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'll end the recording.